Imagine walking home on an ordinary afternoon when you hear the faintest sound, a small cry, almost lost in the bustle of the street. You turn, and there it is, a tiny, shivering kitten, abandoned and alone. For most, it might be just another stray, but for one teenager, this moment would change everything. Without a second thought, they scoop the kitten up, their heart racing with a mix of concern and compassion. But what they don't know is that hidden in the background, a photographer captures this act of kindness, a moment of pure humanity frozen in time. Little do they realize that simple act of rescue is about to be shared with the world in a way they never expected. As the teenager cradles the kitten, unsure of what to do next, the photographer watches, quietly deciding whether or not to reveal the photo. What happens next? Does the teenager's good deed stay a private moment, or does it become something bigger, with eyes watching from all over the world? Stick around as we dive deeper into this unexpected connection and uncover what happens when kindness meets the lens. You won't want to miss the surprising twist that awaits. The teenager stood there, holding the kitten, heart pounding as it mewed softly, its tiny body trembling from the cold. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows on the street, and a chill hung in the air. They hadn't expected to find anything today, let alone a helpless animal. In the back of their mind, they felt the weight of the decision forming. What now? The kitten's fur was matted with dirt, its eyes wide with fear. Without hesitation, the teenager cradled it close, whispering softly to calm it. They could feel the warmth of its tiny body against their chest, but that didn't mask the deeper feeling growing inside them, confusion and anxiety. They hadn't planned on this. Their parents were strict about pets, and they knew there would be a million questions they couldn't answer if they brought the kitten home. But it wasn't just about the kitten. The teenager's world had always felt like a mix of shadows and light. Every day felt the same: school, home, the constant hum of their social media feed, the pressure of living up to some ideal that didn't seem to fit them. But this moment, this felt real. They could feel it in their gut, the weight of this tiny life in their hands, the responsibility it carried. Still, doubt lingered in the back of their mind. What if this was all a mistake? What if the kitten had a family? Maybe it didn't need saving. Maybe it was just a part of the street, a part of life. But that thought faded quickly. The kitten's desperate eyes stared up at them, and a sudden sense of urgency rose within the teenager. They couldn't just leave it there. Meanwhile, from the corner of the street, unnoticed, the photographer adjusted the lens of their camera. They'd been standing there for a few minutes now, watching the teenager. At first, it had been nothing more than a fleeting moment, but as the teenager knelt down to lift the kitten, the photographer knew they'd captured something powerful. The emotion was raw, unfiltered, and the story was unfolding in real time. The photographer had been out that day, looking for something, though they weren't entirely sure what. A good shot, an interesting angle, something that would tell a deeper story. They weren't out to photograph kindness per se, but this felt like more than just an act of compassion. It was a quiet rebellion against the disconnection they'd seen in the world. The teenager's hesitation, their care for a creature that most would overlook it, was a kind of silent protest against the apathy that often ruled the streets. But then a new feeling crept into the photographer's mind, one they hadn't expected. They'd thought this would just be a candid shot, a moment in time. But as they continued to focus their lens, they started to wonder, should they show the teenager's face? Should they reveal their identity to the world, or keep this moment anonymous? The dilemma was real. On one hand, the image would gain attention. It would draw empathy, maybe even admiration. It could go viral. On the other, showing the teenager's face felt like crossing a boundary. It wasn't just a photo. It was a private moment. And who were they to make that decision for someone else? The teenager, meanwhile, was still standing on the street, staring at the kitten, unsure of what to do next. A car passed by, and for a moment, they were lost in the rush of the world around them. The reality of the situation hit them hard. They couldn't just stand there all night with the kitten. They had to decide. But what if they didn't have the right to decide? What if someone else had already made their choice, And this kitten was never meant to be saved? With a deep breath, the teenager finally made up their mind. They had to take the kitten home. They had no plan, no idea how they were going to explain it to anyone. But at that moment, the kitten's life felt more important than anything else. But as they turned to leave, something caught their eye, the flash of a camera. The photographer had taken the shot. The teenager froze. It was too late to turn back. The photographer's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't intended for it to happen this way, but now that the picture had been taken, the thought of keeping it hidden felt impossible. This was a story worth telling. But should they tell it? There was a part of them that felt the weight of what had just transpired this moment had crossed into something personal. What right did they have to capture it and share it with the world? After all, the teenager hadn't known they were being photographed. They hadn't asked for this attention. But the dilemma wasn't just about privacy. The photographer had seen something more than just a photo. This moment spoke to something deeper, something about kindness, about the way the world often seemed to ignore those in need, about how small acts could spark something bigger. The picture wasn't just a snapshot, it was a story that could change the way people viewed compassion in a world where it often felt hard to come by. Still, the photographer hesitated. What if it was too much? What if showing this moment to the world turned the teenager's life upside down? Would the attention be too much for someone so young, someone so unsure of their place in the world? The photographer couldn't stop thinking about it. What should they do next? Back on the street, the teenager was now walking faster, their steps quickening as they made their way toward home. The kitten's fragile mewling was a constant reminder that there was no turning back. They couldn't just abandon it now. But the closer they got to their door, the more the weight of their decision pressed on them. What would they do if their parents found out? What would they say? And what if they couldn't take care of it? What if, by trying to help, they only made things worse? The photographer's decision was still weighing heavily on their mind. As they watched the teenager disappear into the distance, they knew one thing for sure: they couldn't just forget about this. The moment they had captured felt too important, too raw to let slip away. But what was the right way to share it? Was this a story that could inspire others, or would it turn into something else entirely? They didn't know the answer. And as they stood there, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The tension between the teenager's uncertainty and the photographer's dilemma grew. The teenager's life was about to change in ways they couldn't imagine, and the photographer was standing on the edge of a choice that could define everything. The world was watching whether they knew it or not. Would the teenager find the courage to face what was ahead, or would their fear hold them back? Would the photographer make the choice to reveal the image, or would they let the moment slip away, lost to time? One thing was clear: this story was far from over, and the next steps would reveal just how deep the ripples of one small act of kindness could go. The streetlights flickered on as the teenager entered their home, the door clicking shut behind them. They could still feel the warmth of the kitten nestled against their chest, its small, fragile body feeling heavier with each step. There was a tightness in their chest that wasn't just from the weight of the kitten, but from the uncertainty that had been building all evening. They placed the kitten gently on the couch, their eyes scanning the room in a haze, almost unable to take in their surroundings. Everything felt so ordinary. The same old furniture, the same quiet, empty space. But now, the teenager knew that this moment, this small, seemingly insignificant act of kindness, had changed things. How could they go back to the same life, to the same routine, after something so real? They sat down on the edge of the couch, their mind spinning. The kitten was calm now, its little body tucked into a tight ball as it slept soundly, no longer shivering. The teenager gently stroked its fur, their thoughts drifting back to the moment in the street. The flash of the camera. The photographer who had captured them without their knowledge. Would that photo ever see the light of day? And if it did, would they be ready for it? The thought made their stomach twist. What if their parents found out? What if everyone saw them as just another person looking for attention, parading their good deeds for the world to see? The teenager had always been self-conscious, always second-guessing their every move. They weren't a hero. They were just them. A kid trying to figure out who they were in a world that seemed to expect so much from them. But there was something in the way the kitten had looked at them that made them pause. It was something that reminded them of the truth they had buried deep down for a long time. Sometimes doing the right thing wasn't about being perfect, or about how others saw you. It was just about showing up when it mattered most. Just as they began to calm their mind, their phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. A notification popped up. Photo by photographer's name has gone viral. The teenager's breath caught in their throat. The photographer's picture had made its way onto social media, shared thousands of times. The photo showed them cradling the kitten, eyes wide with concern, yet tender in their touch. The caption read, "A moment of kindness in a world that often forgets." The teenager's heart raced as they scrolled through the comments. Some were kind, praising the act of compassion. Others were less kind, questioning why they'd been photographed in the first place, why they hadn't been asked for permission. Some people even speculated about their motivations. Was this a staged moment for attention? Or was it genuine? The teenager felt a cold sweat break out. This wasn't how they had imagined it. The photo wasn't just a memory now, it was a statement, something others could interpret however they wanted. They felt exposed, vulnerable in a way they hadn't anticipated. But as they kept scrolling, something shifted. A message caught their eye, buried beneath the noise of the thousands of comments. It was from someone they didn't know, someone who had shared the post with a simple note, "This is the kind of world I want to live in. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." The words hit the teenager harder than they expected. For a moment, they just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a weight lift from their shoulders. Maybe they couldn't control how people saw them, but the truth was still there. What they had done was real. And it had meant something to someone, even if that someone was a stranger. They glanced at the kitten, still curled up peacefully on the couch. It was safe. And in that moment, the teenager realized something. This wasn't about them or the photographer or the attention. It was about the kitten. About showing that kindness mattered, even in small, quiet ways. The world might have a lot of noise, but moments like these were louder, in their own way. As the hours passed, the teenager found themselves grappling with the idea of what it meant to be seen, to be part of a story that was shared. But they couldn't ignore the truth. They had done something good. They had taken responsibility for a life when they didn't have to. And maybe that was enough. In the days that followed, the attention slowly faded, as things often do on the internet. The photo was still circulating, but the comments grew fewer, the story buried beneath newer posts. The teenager had expected to feel a sense of relief when the spotlight moved on, but instead, they felt something else: pride. Not because of the attention, but because they had stood up in a moment that required it. They had acted when most would have walked by. And though the world may forget about this kitten, they wouldn't forget the feeling of saving it. The photographer, too, had their own struggles in the aftermath. Their inbox was flooded with questions, some curious, some critical. The moral dilemma they had wrestled with wasn't over, but with time, they began to understand the impact of their decision. The photo wasn't just about them. It wasn't about turning a profit or gaining fame. It was a story that spoke to the way kindness could still be found in the most unexpected places. They saw the teenager's message under the viral post, the one that expressed thanks for the reminder of kindness, and they felt a weight lift off their shoulders. The teenager had seen the photo, not as an invasion of privacy, but as an opportunity to share something deeper. And in doing so, they had opened a door that the photographer hadn't even known was there. It wasn't about the photo. It was about the message behind it. As the photographers scrolled through the positive responses, they began to feel a sense of resolution. They didn't need to justify their actions anymore. They had captured something that mattered. And while they had struggled with the ethics of sharing the image, they now realized that the teenager's willingness to show vulnerability had made it possible for this moment to become a story worth telling. Months passed and life went on. The kitten, now healthy and playful, had become a beloved part of the teenager's world. They had named it and taken it to the vet, where they learned it was only a few weeks old. The teenager had made a decision. They would keep the kitten, despite the challenges it brought. It wasn't just about saving it anymore, it was about being responsible for it, about caring for something in a way they had never done before. And through it all, the photo remained. A reminder that even in a world full of noise, there were still quiet moments that mattered. There were still stories worth telling. And sometimes, a small act of kindness could echo louder than you ever expected. The teenager never became famous, but they didn't need to. They had found something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of themselves, of their capacity to care, and of the way their small choices could ripple out into something bigger than they ever imagined. In the end, the story wasn't about the kitten, or the photo, or the viral moment. It was about the heart behind it, the heart that chose kindness over indifference, courage over hesitation, and love over fear. And that was the story worth telling.